reviewing briefly what I spoke about last night, which is the role of primarily identification and how it affects our practice with these categories. And you remember, I came to the end and spoke about control and how this is what is primarily revealed to us, the loss of control or the lack of control we have over the lives of others, what happens to us, even what our mind does. This is what the practice shows us. So cultivating upekkha towards dear friends, towards difficult people, of course, identification arises. Our agendas are revealed, our preferences are revealed, our desires and dislikes, our judgments. And I use conventional language, our, but of course they're not ours. They're just those traits, those experiences. Identification is revealed. And as we continue to cultivate upekkha, the wisdom of understanding ownership of action can be quite challenging to identification and that aspect of the mind that is strongly and habitually identified. More than any of the other Brahma Viharas, Upekkha challenges the ego. The ego that wants to control other people or our own experiences, the ego that wants to control reactivity, and the ego that wants to control the unfolding of the practice itself. Often, the way the practice confronts the ego is not so obvious. In our direct experience, what we often see is resistance, judgment, doubt, any number of reactions about the practice itself or about our own capacity to do it. And because the Upekkha practice takes the mind into the gravitational field of wisdom, the closer we get, the more backlash we can experience. So please be gentle with yourselves. A lot of people today were speaking about how difficult the practice has been in the last couple of days. This is what I was referring to at the outset when I said this practice requires so much patience and gentle persistence. This category of the difficult person, which is usually in a Brahma Vihara the most difficult, is, of course, where all of these places of identification will be revealed really strongly. Please be careful here, because if we have a habit of being judgmental towards ourselves, we can use the phrase kamasaka as a weapon. So we read or hear the texts and how they say beings are owners of their intentional actions. There's a text in the Visuddhimagga. It says, whose if not theirs is the choice by which they'll become happy, will get free of suffering, or will not fall away from the success they have attained. We hear this or read this, and in the middle of the practice, when it's bumpy, we say to ourselves, well, this practice is really difficult. It's really intense. I'm not happy. I'm really struggling. It's my fault. Or, the practice as it is in these days, today and yesterday, it's so messy, and maybe we're full of restlessness and doubt and disappointment. And we think to ourselves, oh, I just can't do this. I'm not good enough. I must not be planting wholesome seeds because this is not a nice experience. The inner critic comes out with a whip, and then maybe we project it onto the practice, this judgment. Please remember, with kindness. We live in samsara. Samsara is not perfect. Samsara will never be perfect. That is its nature, imperfection. And we, as beings of mind and matter, are not separate from samsara. We wouldn't need to practice if we were perfect. We have ideals and things that we think we should be able to attain based on past experience or based on our ideas of our own capacity. If things don't fall into harmony with those ideals, we really suffer. We suffer so much because of identification. The practice is just doing what the practice does because of karma, because of causes, because of conditions. We train the mind to incline to upekkha. We plant wholesome seeds, and that's all we can do. And then things unfold as they will because of causes and conditions and karma, because of nature. Any identification with this whole process is deep suffering. And it's the kind of unhappiness that the Buddha was talking about in the text that I quoted last night, that leads to more unwholesome states, not fewer unwholesome states. Because when we fall into habits of trying to make the practice go the way we want it to, and use a lot of effort to do that, I'm sorry to say it won't ever work. And before you judge yourself for that, please remember also, don't think, oh, I chose wrong effort. I did the wrong thing. I'm practicing in the wrong way. No, actually, you had nothing to do with that. Habit and conditioning did those things. Confusion did those things. Desperately wanting to be free of suffering and not knowing how to go about it did those things. The Buddha said again and again and again, nothing is to be taken as I, me, or mine, not even the practice. So please be careful about self-judgment around the practice. Please be careful around self-judgment about habit. When I say be careful, what I mean is please notice if it is arising. As I've said before, one of the powers of this practice is that we direct this phrase both ways, towards ourselves and using the other person as the object, so inwardly and outwardly. So when we fall into habits of self-judgment, we are forgetting that basic fact of nature. And self-judgment can be so toxic. It's as if there's some ideal and we'll never reach it. I should be able to do this. I've been practicing for years. How come I can't do this? You know, there's so much violence in that. And when we judge ourselves based upon these ideals, what begins to happen? Remember that sequence I spoke about last night? We apply it inwardly. So we crave perfection. Independence on craving, seeking happens. Depending on seeking, judgment happens. Depending on judgment, desire and lust happens, accompanied by thought. Dependence on this, more identification happens. Oh, it's so painful. So this is why it's necessary to be so patient and so gentle in this practice. We cannot do this practice. We cannot force this practice to create a certain result. This is impossible. And that kind of dynamic that I was just describing with, you know, the causal conditions of deep suffering on account of idealism, this turns into inner warfare, or the part of us that has these ideals is in open warfare with the part that is simply habit and conditioning. I don't have to tell you how painful this is. So this requires not merely patience and kindness, but one other thing, and that is forgiveness. Basic forgiveness towards ourselves for being imperfect. It's not that we slide into unwholesome states and condone them, or stop the practice altogether, stop trying to train the mind. It means simply that we embrace our humanity. We recognize that we're doing the very best we can right now, given what is arising, given habit, given conditioning, given karma. We forgive this conventional person who's dealing with all of this as best as he or she can. Being able to honestly see where we are at this moment, but not to lose ourselves in story and recrimination, is a great strength in the practice. Without forgiveness and without accepting impermanence or imperfection, we are at war. As I said, we're fighting that battle. But it's a wonderful human capacity to hold two opposite things at the same time. Both of those sides of our experience are happening. The one side that wants to be free and the one side that's stuck in habit. There's a wonderful quote from Marshall Rosenberg, who was the founder of Nonviolent Communications. And he says this: an important part of self-compassion is to be able to empathetically hold both parts of ourselves, the self that regrets a past action and the self that took the action in the first place. This bit of mental gymnastics is something we can all do. This is what forgiveness is. Both things are happening because we can regret having a habit. We can regret whatever happened that caused that habit and work to train the mind in a new way. And also hold the fact that there's that being who did that in the first place, together. The power of this habit is simple planting of seeds. And a number of you today have spoken so movingly of being in the middle of real difficulty and just, it's like, okay, just coming back to the phrase, kamasaka, kamasaka, kamasaka. Acknowledging and connecting with what is arising that is making that difficult. Feeling that, but not getting lost in it. Just putting it aside and continuing. Not forcing the practice to do something other than what it's doing. This is how natural upekkha can arise by itself. When we forgive habit for being habit, when we understand kamasaka, okay, I think I'll just plant wholesome seeds now. When we make that choice and really hold all the reactivity in a space of kindness and patience and forgiveness without trying to force the practice to go in any particular direction. This is quite inspiring practice, even if it's really messy. Because what we're doing when this happens is we're disconnecting from liking and not liking, from ideas of this practice is better than that practice. We're just doing the practice. This is where a balanced heart arises. Because when we can do this, when there's that little bit of space, somebody was talking about how it was just a tiny bit. When there is that little bit of space, it's impossible to get completely lost in habitual self-judgment. And when we don't take certain phenomena, certain experiences as preferable or not, we don't get lost and end up in that place of internal warfare. Of course, every single thing I've just said in the last half hour or so applies outwardly as well as inwardly. Somebody was saying it's easier to forgive people outside than to forgive themselves. And given our conditioning, that's very true. But the process is the same. So no matter what people say, no matter what people do, we are training the mind to incline to that wisdom that understands all beings are owners of their action. And the huge benefit of upekkha in life is that things happen and there's a lot more space to choose clinging or not, reactivity or not. And when we develop this habit of inclining to upekkha, the mind more naturally goes there. Somebody was saying today, it was a beautiful story. They said, well, the practice, it wasn't easy and, but it was going on. And then they had a difficult day. They had to go to work. And people at work were remarking, oh, you seem remarkably calm. And when there is feedback from the outside like that, that's a sign that something is happening in the practice, even if we can't really feel it inside. We tend to assess the practice based on whether what we are experiencing is pleasant or unpleasant, quiet or restless, wholesome or unwholesome. The kind of practice where we sit and can connect with ease and the mind is fixed and balanced, and we sit there for an hour and the time goes by really fast. That's good practice, right? Well, yes, there might be concentration, there might be equanimity, there might be steadiness and balance of mind. These are beautiful mind states and quite a lovely experience. This is one form of good practice. Another form of good practice looks completely different. We're full of confusion and restlessness and aversion. And in the middle of that, we hold ourselves kindly, we pause, and we keep doing the best we can to incline the mind to upekkha. We may have to start again 200 times in the course of 45 minutes. It can be this way sometimes. But we're restarting. We're still doing the practice. This is also good practice. It's not so much fun. I will admit that. But think of all the energy that you need to use to begin again and again and again like that. You're creating a powerful habit. This is a lot of training going on. And where those other kinds of nice practice come from, where we just sit down and boom, the mind is there, that's what results by itself. I lose track of the number of times I've heard people say, oh, I was sitting there and it was really difficult and all sorts of terrible things were arising and I was just applying the instructions, inclining the mind, and then suddenly everything falls into place. Having that kind, honest forgiveness that allows imperfection is what creates the conditions for that to happen. Kind of total acceptance of brokenness and messiness is what allows perfection to arise by itself. One thing to say about the energy this takes, it's really important we really engage here with awareness, because in daily life, it's much more likely we won't notice. We need to notice self-judgment or thoughts that are, unjustifiably critical. We really need to pay attention to where is the mind going around ourselves, our practice, and other people. Remember that these are just thoughts, perceptions, not necessarily actual fact. And then feel into what might be underneath that. Simple experience. honestly, but gently. This doesn't take time, and this isn't a long process of inquiry. What is this? Where is it coming from? No, it's just touching into the body. Honestly, but gently, not rejecting anything, simply feeling. Remember, you don't want any warfare. And then gently, kindly, really connecting with Kamasaka or whatever phrase you use. All beings have their own journey. Things are as they are. Whatever resonates. A number of you have described some really beautiful phrases. Whatever allows you to incline to wisdom in that moment. Choosing to incline to Upekkha. And those sittings you had that are so kind of turbulent and full of restlessness and confused, or maybe the whole retreat. This is where that habit comes from of inclination, again and again and again. Creating a habit of upekkha is all we are doing. And forgiving nature for being nature. So I want to close with a verse that I love a lot. Many of you have heard it many times. It comes from the Japanese medieval poetess, Izumi Shikubu. She says, seeing the moon at dawn, solitary, mid the sky, I knew myself completely, no part left out. So may we embrace ourselves just as we are and keep creating new habits, wholesome habits, onward leading habits, inclining to wisdom and compassion, so that the fruits of the seeds we plant will be our future. And that future, that could be in the next hour. So please continue, everybody. You're doing a beautiful job. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. Thank you for your kind attention. May you have a good evening of practice.